Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm going to be discussing popular manga that have never been released in English. Now, as I'm sure all of you are aware of, manga has become increasingly popular in the West, and it's easy to think to yourself, gee, it feels like every single manga is available these days in English. But that isn't true. And there's some surprisingly popular ones that still have yet to see an English release. And so I thought it might be interesting to take a look at them. But the first thing I thought I might clarify is what I mean by popular. Now, popular means a lot of different things. And the way that I decided to take a look at them was to simply look at best-selling. So like the best-selling manga series that have not been released in English. Now, there is an argument to be made that the better parameter for popular would be sales per volume, but that becomes much more complex once you start looking at it that way. So I thought it would be easier, at least for today, to just simply look at the best-selling manga series that have yet to be released in English. The other thing that I wanted to mention just before I started discussing these manga is what I mean by released in English. Now, it's very tempting for me to take a look at a series like Galgo 13, to take a look at a series like Oshimbo, and to say that they haven't been released in English. But that isn't strictly true, simply because they have had best-of compilations released in English. And while I personally don't consider that to be a proper release of a manga in English, I think a proper release would be releasing the entire series in English, I still acknowledge the fact that it was released in English in some shape or form, so I decided instead to take a look at manga that, as far as I'm aware of, has never been released in English. So having said all that, what is the most popular manga that has yet to see an English release? And in terms of total volumes sold, that would be Kochikame. Now, many of you might not be familiar with Kochikame, but it is a long-running series, really long-running series I should say, that ran in Weekly Shonen Jump from 1976 to 2016, with a special volume released in 2021. And speaking of volumes, Kochikame has released 201 volumes of manga, which is utterly massive. In terms of volumes sold, it has sold 156.5 million copies, which is quite impressive. And the plotline, as far as I'm aware of, keep in mind that because these haven't been released in English, I haven't read any of these, so I'm just going off of what I've heard of. It is about a middle-aged cop called Kankichi Rotsu, and basically comes up with all these schemes, in order to be able to get rich quick. And it's a comedy series, it's a gag series, as you might imagine. A lot of the schemes that he comes up with go horribly wrong, and from what I've heard, it's a pretty good series. You might be wondering to yourself, this seems pretty popular, and it is very popular in Japan. It's been adapted into a wide variety of media. You might be wondering to yourself, why hasn't it been released in English? And while there is no definitive answer to that, the answer that everyone seems to always give is the fact that it's just too long. 201 volumes is too much for an English publisher to release, and particularly when it isn't guaranteed, and in the case of Kochikame, it is certainly not guaranteed that it would be a success. Having finished talking about that, I think the next series that I want to talk about is a series called Touch. Touch is a manga that was released between 1981 and 1986. It was actually released by Mitsuru Adachi, who, if you guys are unfamiliar with, he's the one who did the Cross Game manga, which, as far as I'm aware, is the only manga of his in English. And it was released across 26 volumes, which 26 volumes doesn't seem that much, but impressively, it has actually managed to sell 100 million copies, which is brilliant. Like, that is an insane amount of copies to sell for a 26 volume series. And from what I've heard, it is a sports manga. It's about baseball. And basically it follows a love triangle. There's two twin brothers plus a girl, and it's kind of the story of them and how they perform in baseball, the relationship between all of them, etc, etc. And it's meant to be an utterly brilliant series, and it was adapted into a really, really popular anime series. So again, it is quite a surprise to me that Touch hasn't seen an English release. Hopefully someday. Touch, unlike Kochikame, seems like something that I can genuinely see released someday, simply because it is only 26 volumes. So I do hope we get to see that in English someday. Following that, we have a series called Hajime no Ippo. And unlike the previous two series, this is actually still running. It started in 1989 and is continuing to run to the present day. It has released 133 volumes and has managed to sell about 96 million copies. As of the figure that I found was from 2019, so I'm sure it's even more now. And I think that is very impressive. And from what I know, it's a boxing manga. It follows a character called Ippo Makunoichi as he works his way through his boxing career. And this is a series that I really wanted to read at some point. I know plenty of other people who have wanted to read it at some point. But again, I think the problem is how long it is. 133 volumes for a series that is not guaranteed, not anywhere close to being guaranteed to be a success. I think would be very problematic. But I still hope that we at some point get to see that released in English someday. As far as I'm aware, I believe Discotek Media did re-release the anime and OVAs and stuff in America recently. So I don't know how those have performed, but hopefully that has brought a bit more awareness to people of this particular series. Following that, we have a manga called Kingdom. Now, I'm sure many of you have already heard of Kingdom for several reasons. And to be honest, of all the manga that I'm going to discuss today, this is the one that I'm most surprised hasn't seen an English release. Simply because the anime incarnation of it, as far as I'm aware, has been pretty popular. Not to mention that it was adapted into a very popular live-action film that was released in America. It was distributed by Funimation. But taking that all into account, it is pretty surprising to me that Kingdom hasn't seen an English release. But before I go on even further, let's actually talk about the figures themselves. So Kingdom started in 2006 and is continuing to run to the present day and has released about 63 volumes as of this video. And last year it was announced that the manga of Kingdom had sold 84 million copies, which again is a huge number. And from what I can tell, the plot of it, it's actually set during the Warring States period in China, which is certainly a really fascinating era of history. And so I would absolutely love, just from that perspective, to be able to read that manga someday. But it is rather surprising that it still hasn't seen an English release. And I think, as I said before, of all of the manga I'm discussing, I think this is the one that surprises me the most. And I think is the most likely that we'll see released in English. I wouldn't be surprised if within the next year or two we hear that it is going to be coming out in English. Following that, we have a series called Captain Tsubasa. Now, Captain Tsubasa here is a bit confusing to me, simply because unlike these other series, which is, continually running in one kind of series of manga, Captain Tsubasa is actually broken up into arcs. So as far as I can tell, and I've seen conflicting information about this, Captain Tsubasa has released either 96 volumes or 104 volumes, I don't know which one, but across 6 manga series. So it is broken up into a lot of different arcs, and I'm not entirely sure when these arcs kind of started and stopped, but in some shape or form, the Captain Tsubasa series has been running since 1981 to the present day, which again is super impressive. And I know that the anime version of this series was very popular worldwide, so again it is kind of a surprising one that hasn't been released in English. Maybe it is to do with all of those arcs, I don't know. But the manga has sold 80 million copies, which again is a highly impressive number and makes it one of the best-selling manga of all time. And from what I'm aware, it's about football, soccer to you Americans, and it follows a character called Tsubasa Uzora as he becomes a footballer, as he starts learning about football, eventually getting into a career with football, etc. And finally, this manga now is actually the only one that I wasn't aware of before doing research for this topic, and that is a manga called Sangokushi. Now, Sangokushi ran from 1971 to 1987 and was released across 60 volumes and proved to be quite a success, selling 80 million copies. And from what I've read online, the plot is that it's a retelling of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, that literary classic. So again, that is a fascinating period of history, and from that perspective I would love to be able to check it out someday. But I think this one, given how old it is, given the fact that even I didn't even know about it until I actually did research for this video, and the number of volumes, I think that of all of these, I think this might possibly be the most unlikely one to be released in English. But you can only hope still. So those were 6 examples of popular manga that have never been released in English. And there's a fair few of them that I would absolutely love to see in English someday. Honestly, I'm still surprised about that Kingdom one, but going beyond that, from what I've heard, these series are fantastic in terms of their storytelling quality, in terms of their artwork, etc. And as much as manga has become popular in the West now, I still think it's worth remembering that there's still a lot of very popular manga that have yet to be released in English, and that we should be aware of, that we should mentioned to publishing companies every so often, etc, etc. So that was my video on popular manga never released in English. Let me know your thoughts on these series. Have you read these series if you live in a country that doesn't speak English? And have they been released there? What were your thoughts of them? Did you like them? Did you dislike them? What are your thoughts on releasing very long manga in English? Do you think it's feasible? Do you think it's impossible? Etc, etc. What are your thoughts on long-running manga like Golgo 13 or Oishinbo being released in best of volumes in English? Are you happy with that? Would you rather see, like me, the entire series released? And of course, if you have any other information about these manga, about any other popular manga that have yet to see an English release, etc, etc, please leave them in the comments below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, I would encourage you to use my Amazon and Right Stuff affiliate links in the description below. When you purchase an anime or manga through those affiliate links, not only are you supporting me, not only are you supporting the channel, but you're also supporting the anime and manga industry. So I'd highly encourage you to use those affiliate links to purchase your anime and manga. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye bye.